Hi everyone. So, by my reckoning, this is day 12 of the war in Ukraine. If we take the 24th of February as a starting point. Um, just a disclaimer, if I repeat anything I've said in previous videos, apologies for that. There is so much going on and so much to speak about. There is not a day goes by when I don't see something inspiring, some act of courage, from the Ukrainian people and others. And it's been on my mind a lot, like a lot of people. Um, I saw a reporter there about a Sky News team, and they came under fire. It may have been mistaken identity because it was possibly the Ukrainian checkpoint. I hope nothing like that happens. It would be really not good for um, PR or morale if, for example, Western journalists was to be killed by accident by the Ukrainians. So they need to be careful not, see the press for what they are. That's also a reminder of the courage of frontline journalists. I mean, these people go into war zones. They face very real dangers. Sometimes they are seriously injured and killed, and they have no weapons. They're not soldiers. So I've always had enormous respect for frontline journalists ever since I saw the film Welcome to Sarajevo, the Michael Winterbottom film. It's not a very well known film, but a good film. Stephen DeLay and Woody Harrelson. It's about the siege of Sarajevo. Um, where to start? I mean, there's just so much going on. It looks like the Russians are really underestimated this. I mean, the Russian forces. I think there's a combination of factors for that. I think that as always, the Kremlin doesn't care about its ordinary soldiers, so they've sent these troops, many of them basically teenagers, into a war zone thinking they were on training exercises. Um, Russian mothers are speaking out, and apparently they're a very strong constituent. During the Chechen wars, they were very vocal against the Kremlin because basically, sadly, what they're saying is true. Their sons and their husbands are being used as cannon fodder. I mean, the Ukrainian resistance has been fierce. I think Putin has seriously underestimated Ukraine, um, just as other tyrants have done with other countries in the past. Um, I think that if a full-scale battle goes on in Kiev, so far it's the fighting's on the outskirts, places like Irpin. A Canadian friend of mine yesterday said that she knew someone who was killed there, not directly, but a friend of a friend. Um, I think if it comes directly to Kiev, I mean, I was watching a documentary last night on the Chechen Wars, and in 2003, Grozny was described as the most destroyed city on earth. Now, Grozny is much smaller than Kiev, so if if this city undergoes a full-scale siege, um, it will be Putin's Stalingrad, and I think it will be a very ferocious battle because Kiev's a big city and it's obviously the capital of the country. So I think we will see a major battle there. So far, it seems to be on the outskirts. It hasn't quite got into the city yet, but it will. Other cities, of course, have already seen fierce fighting: Mariupol, Kharkiv, and others. Um, the generosity that we've seen from this, in war you see the worst of humanity, but you also see some real generosity. There was a moving picture from Poland where Polish mothers had left their strollers, their prams at the station for Ukrainian mothers to pick up. In Moldova, a young woman had given out space to Ukrainians in her house. Moldova, of course, now has serious fears about what Russia will do next. I don't think Putin's going to move on any other country just yet. I think he's going to wait for Kiev to fall, if indeed it does fall. Um, I mean, from a purely military point of view, not moral point of view, but a purely military point of view, it would be insanity for Russia to try that. I mean, Moldova's a small country, so are the Baltic states, but to try and open up another front in another country when Russian forces are being seriously tested in Ukraine would be militarily insane. Um, And if Putin has any sense, he would listen to his generals, or some of them have been killed. Um, but I think this is a dangerous situation because we now have this dictator who is absolutely obsessed with irredentism, reclaiming supposed lost territory from not even the Soviet Union, the Tsarist era. As someone said, Putin doesn't want to roll back to 1989. He wants to roll back to 1889. Um, he doesn't see these countries as countries, and some of them are not NATO members. So what's to stop Putin trying it? I think at this point he is dangerous enough to do it. I don't think it's hyperbole. Um, and an even more sinister aspect of this is the fact that Russia is a nuclear state, and it's the biggest nuclear state. Now, I still think it's unlikely that Moscow would actually use a nuclear weapon, but it isn't inconceivable. Once in history, nuclear weapons have been used, of course, at A bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Um, Harry Truman done it in World War Two. Whatever people think of that, that was a policy that Truman took. He done it. What's to stop Putin doing it? Because he justifies that conventional warfare isn't working. I mean, it's a sinister thought, and I don't want to think about it, but Russia has that option, and it would be an absolutely insane option. I think if that were to happen, um, and I hope to God it doesn't, but if it does, if Russia was to try and detonate a nuclear device on a city in Ukraine, then I mean, forget sanctions. We would absolutely be in World War III if we aren't already. And I think there is actually a good argument to be made that whether we recognize it or not, World War III has started because of the implications of what has happened. But even if it hasn't, and even if that would be the trigger point, um, NATO couldn't respond in kind. As much as there would be fury and as much as there would be demands to do so, we couldn't because it would guarantee the end of civilization. It really would. I mean, um, it's a terrifying prospect. I think the only thing NATO could do is respond with conventional bombing, which wouldn't be the same response, but I think we'd have to do that. Focus on military sites, but if this is going to be a total war, then unfortunately civilians will die on the Russian side as well. I mean, these are dark thoughts, and I hope it doesn't come to that. But the problem is, this is not going to be a short war. It's not going to be like 2008 in the Georgian Republic, the South Ossetia War, which was short but bloody, or other military adventures Russia's got involved in. I think it'll be even worse in Chechnya. I mean, the Chechen wars were brutal and bloody and dragged on for years. Um, but Ukraine's a much bigger population, and it's Europe. Um, and I think the best case scenario with this is there's going to be a long entrenched war. Well, actually, the best case scenario would be if there is mass mutiny in the Russian forces, or if there's a coup in Moscow. But that's unlikely at the moment because Putin has absolute power. But I think it would be a wonderful thing if there was a coup in Moscow that brought down Putin and replaced him with not a Western puppet, but a moderate, someone who actually has a sane head on their shoulders, who isn't um, causing instability in Europe and the world. Um, I say the world because, there are other conflicts going on right now um, around the world. This is not the only war going on. The war in Syria is far from over. Yemen is a disastrous situation. Tigray, the various insurgencies in West Africa. Um, Burma, of course, is still very much hasn't been in the news recently, but that conflict is still going on. There's other conflicts going on in the world, but none of them involve nuclear power so directly as this one does. That's why, for that reason, this is the most important. Also, none of them involves an east-west standoff to the same extent as this does. That's not to say the innocent Burmese or Ethiopians or Tigrayans or Syrians are less important than Ukrainians, but you need to look at that context as to why it's getting more coverage. Also, in Europe, naturally, we're concerned about our neighbour. This is a European country. Um, but I saw moving footage also of musicians in Kiev, a little girl too, singing in the subway the Ukrainian national anthem. I mean, in Britain we talk about the spirit of the Blitz. I think we're really seeing now the spirit of Ukraine. Um, I don't know where this is going to end, but I think that it's not just another war. I think that this has really got implications that could go in ways that we can't even imagine, and that's scary. But me personally, I feel this constant pull to do something. I trained as a journalist. Now I'm starting off. I haven't even had a single article published yet. Um, I don't think if I write to an editor, they're going to let me go to Ukraine untested. But I don't know what sort of avenue I have for that. Also, as a freelancer, I wouldn't have the same level of protection as I would with, say, the BBC or ITN or Sky. I mean, there's lots of things to consider, so I don't want to be cavalier. Um, but I just feel I have to do something. Um, and I may as well say it at this point. The thought of volunteering with the Ukraine International Brigade has definitely crossed my mind. I've never really served. I've never been in a war zone. I had my Navy training. I didn't pass. So would that count against me? Would they look at that? And what I understand, because one of my subscribers actually asked about this, what I understand is that they're doing this professionally. There's a whole application process. They're not just saying, okay, here's a gun, go in. They are looking at who's applying, and they're taking it seriously. A lot of people are ex-services, although the army has been very clear that there is not permission for soldiers to go out there. The same with the Metropolitan Police and other services. But I think the pull of this is very strong. I've seen guys from the United States, Canada, across Europe, even as far away as Australia and Japan, volunteering. I have enormous respect for them because in many cases they're civilians. Now, people might say that's reckless, and maybe it is, but the way I see it is those men are motivated by what they feel is right. Um, in the Spanish Civil War, of course, there was the International Brigade. Some of the volunteers then were quite famous. The writer George Orwell, for example, and others done that. I'm not saying I will, but I'd be lying if I said it hasn't crossed my mind. And I'm not. If I make that decision, I'll be making a video specifically about that. I'll be talking about it. Right now, I haven't, so I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. I'm not trying to be. Need to plug this battery in. I'm not trying to be sort of like that's what I'm doing. Um, but honestly, the Ukrainians need as much help as they can get now. Even if I don't do that, there might be a possibility for some sort of humanitarian voluntary work with refugees, perhaps in Poland or Moldova or Romania. To be honest, I feel a bit helpless. Feel a bit helpless. Whatever I do, I need to sort out things here first. I've business to sort out here. I want things to be tidy before I decide to do something like that because it's no small thing. But I do feel frustrated and helpless. I mean, I could donate to a charity, although my financial situation isn't wonderful right now. But I really want to do something practically, and I'm trying to decide what that might be. if indeed I do. Um, I just feel a very, very strong pull. Um, because I really think, we can be complacent and say, well, it's just another war zone, it's 2,000 miles away, it's just in Ukraine. But I honestly believe this thing will spread, and I just want to know I've done my part. That's all. I'm not going to be reckless. I'm not going to do anything without giving it serious, serious thought. But um, I don't know. I mean, obviously, on that issue of volunteering militarily, there are very deep questions about that. Can I kill? Can I be prepared to die? And I can't say that. I've never been in a war zone. I might be from Northern Ireland, but I've never really been in a war zone. Not like that. So honestly, I don't know. But I just feel like it's very hard for me to just get on with life at the moment and just I just want to make myself useful somehow. And to long-term subscribers, I'm not about to go out there tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I just feel a pull to do something, whether it be in the context of my starting off work as a journalist, whether it be volunteering on a humanitarian level, and then need to see what's involved with that, or the International Brigade. Um, I've no desire to kill a young Russian soldier, but I also don't want to stand by and watch young Ukrainian men and women have to do this all themselves. And it's about Ukraine, but there's many other reasons as well. But if I ever took that decision, it would be very much something that I've given an enormous thought to. Um, but that's how I feel right now. That's how I feel right now. I wish I could have a more upbeat message with this video. I guess I've mentioned the courage of the Ukrainian people is inspiring. Today's International Women's Day. I think of those brave women in Ukraine doing what they can. Um, Mothers also bringing their children across the border. I can't imagine the stress of that sort of situation. I also think of people in Russia. I mean, this is something we must never ever lose sight of. The courage of ordinary Russians. There was another group in Perm who have been arrested in cities across Russia. I do think it's the beginning of the end for Putin. He still has support, and yes, there's a lot of Russians that support him with that ghastly Z logo, but I think there is a significant minority of Russians who are turning against him, and I think that will grow when they find their husbands and sons coming back in body bags. But those young Russians, and it's mostly young Russians, some older Russians who are speaking out. That's no small thing. They're being threatened with 15 years in jail, beatings, smeared as traitors, all sorts of things, because they know this is wrong. I mean, they don't have to do it. It would be much easier to toe the line and just support Putin, but they're doing the right thing, and I just have enormous, enormous respect for them. And I'm not just saying that. I've always had a good impression of the Russian people. I've always considered them, from what I've seen in interviews and so on, I consider them to be thoughtful people. I mean, it's one of the most read countries in the world. Russians apparently, the average Russian has more books than a lot of other countries. Britain is also high in that regard. So, these are people that know that their president is making their country a pariah, the so-called president. I honestly think, Putin always had this image of this cold, powerful figure, almost like a Bond villain. I think it was Bush said, he saw that icy stare in Putin's eyes, and he always had this sort of outward confidence. You know, he's not physically tall; he's quite short in stature, but there was always this aura of power around Putin. I actually think that's starting to crumble, and he's now looking more like one of those old Soviet leaders who is unhinged and um, just not all there. I think Putin has got bunker mentality. I mean, no one is standing up to him. We can't count on someone like Sergei Lavrov because he's just as much a hawk as Putin is. Dmitry Medvedev or Mishustin, the prime minister. Um, that inner circle, they are as hawkish as Putin, so I don't think we could count on any of them to be moderates. Um, and courageous opposition figures like Alexei Navalny are in prison. Difficult to see how an internal coup would happen, but if it did, it would be a wonderful thing for the world. Indeed, for Russia. Let's not forget ordinary Russians are going to suffer economically, not as much as the Ukrainians, but they are suffering. And all of this is down to one man, Vladimir Putin. One man, one unhinged dictator, one unhinged little tyrant who is causing mass misery to millions of people because of his irredentism, because of this obsession with trying to rebuild the old Tsarist empire, and it's affecting everyone. I mean, there's a group of Indian students stuck in the city of Sumy. A group of Chinese students complained that their embassy didn't do enough to help them. I think if anything happens to those Indian students, then New Delhi's position will hopefully change, and they'll be more forceful in their condemnation of Russia rather than sitting at the sidelines. This is an opportunity for India to really show that it's the world's biggest democracy and be on the right side. Um, so far, it's failed to do that. This thing is going to go on. There is a risk, of course, that we will start to get tired of it. We'll start to tire of hearing about Ukraine, and there'll be sort of people will want to think about other things, and that's understandable. But I think that would be a mistake because I think this is going to spread. I mean, in the First World War, we saw it's just a Balkan crisis. In the Second World War, it's just Poland. But then, when France was invaded, people started realizing what's going on. Now, I'm not suggesting Putin's going to attack Western Europe, but I do think this is going to spread. I'd be surprised if it doesn't. And final point, things I've said about what I might do, it's not in concrete, not at all. So, yeah, that's I want that for the record. Technically, in this country, I'd be breaking the Foreign Enlistment Act of 1870, which prohibits volunteers for fighting for a foreign force against a country that we're not at war with. Well, we're not technically at war with Russia, but frankly, relations are so bad right now that we are in a Cold War at the very least. So, and also that law has never been enacted. As far as I know, no one's ever been punished for doing it. So, I honestly am not too worried about that. Right, I'll leave it there. That's the situation. If you're in Ukraine, stay strong. Slava Ukraini. And if you're in Russia, you're Russian and you're watching this, please know the world is not against you, the Russian people. It's against your so-called leader who is plunging the world into darkness, who is creating the problems for Russia. Um, we see you. We know there are ordinary Russians speaking out. We know that. And thank you.